Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I've got a video clip here that has been circulating in the social media, and for good reasons. I think it's addressing some of the biggest questions that every African out there should be concerned about. Why is Africa poor, and yet we've got so many resources? Doesn't make any sense. Here is this young lady giving an explanation of why Africa is poor. Let's just listen to what she has to say. Sorry, messing around.
One thing that keeps me puzzled, despite having studied finance and economics at the world's best universities, the following question remains unanswered. Why is it that 5,000 units of our currency is worth 1 unit of your currency, where we are the ones with the actual gold reserves? It's quite evident that the aid is in fact not coming from the West to Africa, but from Africa to the Western world. The Western world depends on Africa in every possible way, since alternative resources are scarce out here. So how does the West ensure that the free aid keeps coming? By systematically destabilizing the wealthiest African nations and their systems, and all that backed by huge PR campaigns, leaving the entire world under the impression that Africa is poor and dying and merely surviving on the mercy of the West. Well done, Oxfam, UNICEF, Red Cross, Life Aid, and all the other organizations that continuously run multi-million-dollar advertisement campaigns depicting charity porn to sustain that image of Africa globally. Ad campaigns paid for by innocent people under the impression to help with their donations. While one hand gives under the flashing lights of cameras, the other takes in the shadows. We all know the dollar is worthless, while the euro is merely charged with German intellect and technology, and maybe some Italian pasta. How can one expect donations from nations that have so little? It's super sweet of you to come with your colored paper in exchange for our golden diamonds. But instead, you should come empty-handed, filled with integrity and honor.
Ben, what do you say to that one?
Good day to you and good day to all viewers. Thank you for joining us. You know, for me, I may take maybe an unpopular stance with some brothers and sisters from Africa, but when I look at Africa, yes, she is right. We have a lot of mineral wealth, and it's quite perplexing to say how have we remained poor despite all this. But the first thing that comes to mind is corruption, and not from outside but from within. Africa was colonized, yes, and the colonizers, despite all the bad they did, they managed to develop, they managed to put some infrastructure down, such that when we eventually found our independence, we had We didn't have to start from zero. We had something that could have catapulted us, and probably overtaken the Western world. But decades later, we have found out that we are still the same, or we have gone backwards under our own rule. And that has very little to do with what, the Westerns have been doing or have done. Look at Africa. There's always fighting, corruption. There's no democracy in most countries. Our people are killing each other, and it's got nothing to do with what the outside world. It's got everything to do with ourselves. Something has to be wrong within. And there is nobody that can fix. And there is nothing that is stopping us from fixing these issues. So I think, it is bad for us to be always blaming others. Why don't we start by looking at ourselves in the mirror and fix the problem from within? And there is nothing, to me, there is absolutely nothing that stops us from moving forward and empowering ourselves and stopping whatever we think is wrong. There is nothing, no excuse whatsoever.
Well, I take it from a slightly different angle. It is true that Africa has got so many resources, so much wealth, and yet we have remained the poorest continent on earth. And this is not just this generation. The generation before us, under colonial rule, and the generation before that, slavery. We have always ended up on the wrong side. If the truth be told, Africa was not the only continent that was at one time exploited by others from other countries, other continents. This has happened elsewhere. South America, for instance, Asia. The one consistent story on this one is that while other nations have been colonized and they've been able to emerge out of the exploitation and become a nation, a strong nation in their own right, we have, for some reason, failed to emerge. We've just blundered from one pillar to the next post. And I think as much as we can dwell on how the West and some of the countries in the East are exploiting Africa today, nothing will change until we first look ourselves in the mirror and ask ourselves, how much have we as a people contributed to our own exploitation and suffering? That is a fundamental question, that before you look at outside influences. Look first for what you can do. What is it we can fix? One common reason why the whites were able to exploit the blacks in a country like Zimbabwe, then Rhodesia, was that whilst the whites constituted a small percentage, the blacks constituted the majority. We were still subjected to white exploitation. And people, if you ask them, they'll tell you it was divide and rule. If the truth be told, it wasn't the whites who taught us to fight among ourselves. We were divided already. They just exploited that weakness. So I think we need to look at what is it we are doing wrong? Because until we fix that, outsiders will continue to exploit us. That, I think, is a starting point. And unfortunately, we have not been very good at looking ourselves in the mirror. Ben.
You know, it reminds me of Professor Lumumba, who spoke and said, and you know, I would have, you know, if I could communicate with the lady, I would have asked to say, you know, she should answer some of the questions that Dr. Lumumba had asked. And he says, Africa has got the resources that makes, you know, or that it can build, you know, mobile phones. But no country in Africa has got a mobile phone brand or manufacturing, you know, facility in Africa. Africa has got, you know, the gold reserves and diamonds, but you find most of them, they sell their raw materials in their raw state. There's no value addition. You know, and he raises a lot to say, even up to pharmaceuticals. Why are we finding ourselves importing pharmaceuticals when we have the ingredients? Now, that is the basic, you know, the ingredients to make, you know, antibiotics, you name it. But we import. Surely you cannot then go and say it is the West that is taking advantage of that, or that has made us not be able to provide our own drugs. I mean, that would be shameful if you were to stand on that leg and say, this is my reasoning. The answer is, all the wealth that Africa is getting, whether it be through FDIs or, you know, within, you know, our local own, you know, industries, everything you are finding, it is being offshored by those that are in high offices. Give you a classic example of Zimbabwe, where it loses over $2 billion worth of gold every single year. And to prove that, the West, they you know, they made a documentary to show who was behind all this. It was the guys from within. The guys in leadership positions, they are the main culprits for offshoring all our wealth. And worse, they do not invest back into the country. They go and buy, infrastructure from outside and as security. So they feel that it's more secure to invest in the Western world than in their own country. So there's your reason. Africa is poor because our leaders are not accountable. They are not being held to account. Most people in Africa, these rich guys, if they were to be audited today, surely our jails would be full. Because they themselves cannot even explain their wealth. You have a certain character. I come from Zimbabwe. I will tell you what Zimbabweans, the Zimbabwean story. There is a guy called Chivayo who gives away people cars, and not just ordinary cars. A car that is over 100,000, he just gives away at a daily basis, and cash on top. He himself, and you cannot explain what his company does, who he employs, and what he does himself. But he's got millions, maybe even billions. And all these, business, activities that, he's doing, they have been red flagged by other African countries to tell Zimbabwean government that, look, this guy here is money laundering, he's stealing from you. And yet the Zimbabwean government do not want him exposed. They will play the hush-hush. Can we then go and say it is the Western world that has kept us, poorer and poorer? Or it is us that are doing this to ourselves? I think, and we agree on this to say, the first step for us to realize and to try and fix what is going on, our failure, is to look ourselves in the mirror and seriously look at it and do something about it. Thank you.
I'll just conclude showing a video clip of the late British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher explaining why some countries are doing well, whereas others are not.
Countries are not rich in proportion to their natural resources. If they were, Russia would now be the richest country in the world. Angola would be very rich, and there are many other countries that have a lot of natural resources, but they have not had an enterprise economy to develop those resources. Russia has everything: oil, gas, diamonds, platinum, gold, silver, timber, marvelous soil, but has been poor. She's also, on the second point, got very bad environment, the Aral Sea. I remember going to one communist country in about the 60s and seeing a puddle coming out of a chimney of brown gas, which of course is a nitrous gas. And I was absolutely horrified. I said, well, what are you doing letting that happen? The lungs of the people must be terrible. This is acid. You can't let that go on. Tact has never been my strong point, as you know. And it is the countries that have had the wrong system, which have not created the wealth, have not cared about people. Look at the other side. Japan, no natural resources. Switzerland, no natural resources. Taiwan, no natural resources. It is the political system which enhances the enterprise of the people and gives it a framework within which to operate, which will deal with this poverty.
So if the truth be told, we in Africa are poor because we have the wrong system of government. We have allowed outsiders to exploit us. As much as many of our African leaders would like to point the finger at the West, yes, the West were at the forefront of colonial exploitation of Africa. But since the various countries in Africa have gained their independence in the last 50, 60 years, we have had new exploiters. This time, they're coming from the East, notably China and Russia. We got rid of the Western colonial exploiters only to gain new exploiters. And now they are competing on the looting of our resources. I believe that if we are serious about solving Africa's problems, we really have to look at sorting our own internal problems, putting our house in order. Because as long as we remain with a political system that allows corrupt, incompetent, and murderous thugs to remain in power, we are in trouble. Benjamin there was talking about how we are losing billions of dollars in gold alone, according to the Al Jazeera documentary Gold Mafia. 80% of our $2 billion gold export per year is being smuggled out. The 1.6 billion US dollars of that money, a lot of it goes to fund the ruling elite. They are using the looted wealth to keep themselves in power. And as long as we allow them to continue looting, they will only become even stronger and stronger. Because now they're in a position where they can bribe literally every major player in our political system. From the voters with chicken and chips at their rallies, and t-shirts and caps, to the headmen and chiefs who are getting, each one of them is getting a motorcycle for the headman, a twin cab truck for the chief, to the MPs who are getting 40,000 US dollars being dished out in the name of housing loans. The deputy ministers are getting 230,000 US dollars housing loans. The ministers themselves, 500,000. The judges, 400,000. When all is said, Mnangagwa must have spent at least 5 billion US dollars in the 2023 elections alone. Of course, he's not going to stamp out corruption because it's keeping him in power. And we can complain all we like that foreigners are the ones who are looting our wealth. It's true, they are, but they are only taking advantage of the failed political system in the country. That has allowed those who are corrupt, incompetent, to stay in power and become so powerful that we are now held ransom to those corrupt, incompetent buffoons. I repeat, the challenge for Africa, if we really want to take our place at the table with the rest of mankind as equals, is not to look at whether it's the East or the West who are exploiting us. Is to look at how we can improve our own governance system. Because until we do, the East and the West, the Middle East, in fact, recently the Middle East have been playing a major role in the exploitation of Africa. Most of our gold, in fact, is not going to China or to London and New York. It's going to Dubai and other countries in the Middle East. We have got to solve the problem of bad governance. And until we do, we will always be in trouble. Think about it. Thank you very much. Those of you who were able to join us, hope we'll be able to do it again, same time, 7 o'clock UK time, 8 o'clock Zimbabwean time. Have a good night.